Welcome to the channel of science fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. Enjoy listening. The air inside the dungeon was damp and stale, carrying the faint metallic tang of forgotten treasures and long-lost battles. Alan, an experienced adventurer who had seen more than his fair share of strange encounters, strolled through its narrow corridors with practiced ease. His boots made a soft rhythmic echo as they connected with the stone floor, the sound almost comforting in its familiarity. This particular dungeon had been disappointingly uneventful so far. Aside from a few skittering creatures and an occasional, half-empty treasure chest, it seemed like every valuable artifact and beast worth fighting had long since been claimed by other adventurers. Alan paused in one chamber, running his fingers along the moss-covered walls, muttering to himself, "I swear, if the guild's maps are this outdated again, I'm demanding my deposit back," he grumbled. Still, there was something about this dungeon that felt different. The air had an unusual energy, like it was waiting for something to happen. Alan, ever the pragmatist, chalked it up to his overactive imagination and pressed onward. The corridors grew narrower, the faint light from his torch flickering against the jagged stone. Then he heard it, a sound that didn't belong. Soft, fragile, almost drowned out by the ambient drip of water, the unmistakable sound of someone crying. Alan froze, every instinct in his body on high alert. Crying was not a sound one typically heard in a dungeon, unless it belonged to a lost adventurer or something worse. He tightened his grip on the hilt of his blade, the leather-wrapped handle, reassuring against his palm, and moved cautiously toward the source of the sound. Each step felt heavier as the crying grew louder, more distinct. It wasn't just crying, it was the sobs of someone in despair, a sound that clawed at his usually steady nerves. When Alan reached the end of the corridor, he found himself at the entrance to a dimly lit chamber. His torchlight spilled into the room, illuminating a sight that took his breath away. Sitting on the floor of a crude makeshift cell was a young woman, her figure both striking and delicate. She wasn't human, that much was clear. Her skin glimmered faintly in the torchlight, a soft shade of silvery blue, and her eyes, large and luminous, seemed to shimmer with their own light as tears streaked down her face. Long flowing hair cascaded over her shoulders like a curtain of starlight, pooling around her where she sat. Alan lowered his blade, though he kept it within reach. "Hey," he called out gently, not wanting to startle her. "Are you okay?" The woman's head snapped up, her glowing eyes locking onto his. For a moment she seemed caught between fear and hope. She shifted slightly, the chains around her wrists clinking softly as she moved. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice melodic but tinged with weariness. Alan took a cautious step closer, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. "Name's Alan. I'm just an adventurer passing through. I heard you crying and thought I'd check it out." The woman's expression shifted, her fear giving way to guarded curiosity. "You're not with them?" Alan frowned. "Them?" She hesitated, glancing toward the shadows as if expecting something to emerge. "The ones who put me here. They're hunting me." Alan stepped closer, kneeling near the edge of the cell. His torchlight revealed the crude construction of the bars, clearly fashioned in haste. "Why are they after you?" The woman hesitated again, her luminous eyes searching his face for any sign of deceit. Finally she spoke, her voice trembling. "Because of who I am. They can't let me escape. If I do, they'll lose their leverage." Alan tilted his head, intrigued. "And who exactly are you?" She took a deep breath, her chains rattling softly. "I am Lyara, Princess of the Celestial Dominion." The title hit Alan like a bolt of lightning. He had heard tales of the Celestial Dominion, a sprawling star empire said to have been lost to internal strife and betrayal. Stories of its royal family were whispered in taverns, but most dismissed them as myths. A princess, Alan repeated, his tone skeptical but not dismissive. In a dungeon. Guess I should have expected that plot twist. Lyara's expression hardened slightly. You don't believe me. I didn't say that, Alan replied quickly. Just, let's say it's a lot to take in. But I'm not here to judge. I'm here to help. If you want out of here, that is. Her eyes widened slightly, the faintest flicker of hope returning. You would do that? Alan smirked. Well, it's either that or spend the rest of the day poking around empty treasure chests. Rescuing a princess sounds way more interesting. Lyara's lips curved into a small, hesitant smile. It was a fragile thing, like a flower blooming in the middle of a storm. Thank you, she said softly. Alan stood, examining the cell's lock. It was old and rusted, clearly not designed to withstand much force. Drawing a small tool from his pouch, he began working on the mechanism. As he did, he cast a glance over his shoulder. So, Lyara, do dungeons always treat their royalty this poorly? Or is this a special occasion? She let out a soft laugh, the sound surprising both of them. You have a strange sense of humor, Alan. Comes with the territory, he said, focusing on the lock. Now let's get you out of here before whoever put you here decides to come back. The lock clicked, and the door swung open with a groan. Lyara stepped out cautiously, her chains still attached, but her posture already more confident. Alan offered her a reassuring nod. Stick close to me, he said, drawing his blade. Something tells me this dungeon's about to get a lot less empty. As they moved together into the corridor, the air seemed to shift. The dungeon, quiet until now, began to hum with a low, ominous energy. Whatever lay ahead, Alan knew one thing for certain. This adventure had just become far more complicated and far more interesting. The air in the dungeon thickened with tension as Alan and Lyara ventured deeper into the shadowy corridors. Each step echoed ominously, the faint hum of the dungeon's malevolent energy growing louder. Lyara stayed close, her chains clinking softly with every cautious step. Alan's sharp eyes scanned the surroundings, his blade gripped tightly, ready for the unexpected. This place doesn't feel right, Alan muttered, his voice low but steady. Lyara's luminous eyes darted around nervously. It's reacting to us. The dungeon isn't just a structure, it's alive. It senses intruders. Alan raised an eyebrow but kept his focus ahead. Great. As if the traps and monsters weren't bad enough. Now the walls are out to get us. The corridor opened into a wide chamber, dimly lit by patches of bioluminescent fungi clinging to the cracked stone walls. The air here was heavier, carrying the unmistakable stench of decay. Alan stepped forward cautiously, his boots scraping against the uneven floor. Lyara lingered behind him, her gaze fixated on a faint shimmer at the edges of the room. Wait, Lyara whispered, her voice urgent. Something is here. Before Alan could respond, the shadows came alive. Small, hunched figures emerged from the darkness, their glowing red eyes piercing through the gloom. Goblins. Crude weapons gleamed faintly in their hands, rusty daggers, splintered clubs, and jagged swords. Their guttural growls echoed, a chilling prelude to their charge. Goblins, Alan said, his tone both annoyed and focused. Of course. The creatures attacked with frenzied speed, their movements erratic and unpredictable. Alan met the first goblin head-on, his blade flashing in the dim light. His strike was precise, cutting down the creature before it could land a blow. Another goblin lunged at him from the side, but Alan sidestepped, using the momentum to drive his sword into its exposed flank. Lyara backed against the wall, her chains clinking as she tried to maintain distance. One of the goblins turned its attention to her, its beady eyes gleaming with malice. It charged, raising its jagged blade high. Lyara's amulet began to glow, the light emanating from between her collarbones intensifying. A barrier of shimmering energy formed just as the goblin's weapon came down. The blade rebounded harmlessly, and the creature stumbled backward, dazed. "Stay behind me," Alan shouted, parrying another attack. The goblins' numbers were growing, more of them pouring into the chamber from hidden crevices. Alan moved. With practiced precision, each swing of his blade deliberate and efficient. He ducked under a wide slash, countering with a swift upward strike that left another goblin crumpled on the floor. But even Alan's skill had its limits. A particularly nimble goblin managed to flank him, its rusty dagger finding an opening and slashing across his arm. Alan grunted in pain, the wound shallow but stinging. Before the goblin could press its advantage, Lyara stepped forward, her amulet glowing brighter than ever. "Hold still," she commanded, her voice steady despite the chaos. Alan barely had time to process her words before she reached out, her glowing hands hovering over his wound. A wave of warmth spread through him as the light from her amulet enveloped the injury. The pain dissipated, and when she pulled her hands away, only a faint scar remained. "Impressive," Alan said, his smirk returning despite the battle raging around them. "Now let's see what else you've got." The goblins, sensing the shift in momentum, regrouped for a coordinated attack. They formed a loose semicircle, their growls deepening as they prepared to overwhelm their prey. Alan tightened his grip on his sword, his eyes darting between the creatures. "Get ready," he said to Lyara. Lyara nodded, her hands glowing once more. As the goblins charged, Alan met them head-on, his blade moving in a blur. He deflected a clumsy swing from one goblin, pivoted, and delivered a clean slash to another. Lyara, meanwhile, focused her energy on supporting him. Her amulet pulsed with light, sending bursts of energy that disrupted the goblins' movements and left them vulnerable to Alan's strikes. One particularly large goblin, clearly the leader, let out a guttural roar and charged at Alan with surprising speed. Its crude axe swung down in a heavy arc, forcing Alan to block with his blade. The impact sent a jolt up his arm, but he held firm, using his free hand to shove the creature back. "A little help here," Alan called out. Lyara stepped forward, her amulet glowing brighter than ever. She raised her hands, and a beam of shimmering light shot forward, striking the goblin leader square in the chest. The creature howled in pain, its movement slowing, as the light seemed to sap its strength. Alan seized the opportunity, driving his sword into the goblin's chest and ending the fight. The remaining goblins hesitated, their leader's fall demoralizing them. Alan took a step forward, his blade gleaming with the faint glow of Lyara's magic. "Anyone else?" he challenged. The goblins retreated, disappearing into the shadows with panicked growls. The chamber fell silent once more, the only sound, Alan's heavy breathing and the faint hum of Lyara's amulet. "That was intense," Alan said, lowering his blade. Lyara approached him, her glowing hands reaching out to inspect his arm. "You're hurt again." "Just a scratch," Alan said, though he didn't resist as she began to heal him once more. The warmth of her magic was soothing, and he couldn't help but notice the determined look in her eyes as she worked. "You're not bad in a fight," Alan admitted, giving her a faint smile. "For a princess." Lyara smirked, a hint of playfulness in her expression. "And you're not bad for an adventurer, but we're not done yet. This dungeon has more dangers ahead." Alan sheathed his blade and gestured for her to follow. "Then let's keep moving. Stick close, princess. I'd hate to lose my new healer." As they ventured deeper into the dungeon, the bond between them grew stronger, forged in the crucible of battle. For the first time, Alan felt like this wasn't just another job. And for Lyara, a flicker of hope began to bloom. Hope that perhaps her journey had taken a turn for the better. The air grew heavier as Alan and Lyara descended deeper into the dungeon. The flickering light of bioluminescent fungi cast long, wavering shadows across the walls, lending an eerie atmosphere to their journey. Despite the tense silence, there was a newfound ease between them. Lyara, though cautious, no longer flinched at every sound, and Alan's sharp remarks carried a lighter, almost teasing tone. "So," Alan began, breaking the silence as he stepped over a loose pile of stones. "This great crown we're after. What makes it so special? Aside from the obvious, of course." Lyara glanced at him, her luminous eyes reflecting the faint light. "The great crown is a relic of immense power. It's said to amplify the abilities of whoever wears it, making them nearly invincible." Alan let out a low whistle. "Nearly invincible, huh? Sounds like the kind of thing everyone wants and no one should have." Liara's lips curved into a small smile. "It's more than that. The crown is also a symbol. In my kingdom, the one who possesses it is seen as the rightful ruler." Alan raised an eyebrow. "Ah, so this isn't just about stopping some evil overlord from getting their hands on it. This is personal." Her smile faltered and she nodded. "It's personal." Alan softened his tone. "Well, let's make sure it ends up in the right hands then. Preferably not mine. I'm not much of a crown-wearing type." Liara's laughter was soft but genuine. "No, I don't think you are." As they continued, the narrow corridor opened into a grand chamber, its vaulted ceiling disappearing into darkness. The faint sound of trickling water echoed, accompanied by a low, rhythmic growl. Alan's hand instinctively went to his blade, his eyes scanning the room. "Stay close," he murmured, his tone suddenly serious. Lyara nodded, her hands hovering near her amulet. The glow between her collarbones pulsed faintly, as if sensing the danger ahead. They moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing softly against the stone floor. The growl grew louder and Alan held up a hand to stop Lyara. From the shadows, a massive creature emerged. It was a chimera-like beast with the body of a lion, the wings of a bat, and a serpent for a tail. Its eyes glowed with malice, and its claws scraped menacingly against the floor. "You've got to be kidding me," Alan muttered, drawing his sword. "What's a thing like that doing down here?" Liara's voice was steady but tinged with urgency. "It's a guardian, the dungeon's way of protecting what's inside." "Great," Alan said, tightening his grip. "And here I thought goblins were going to be the highlight of my day." The chimera let out a deafening roar, its wings spreading wide as it charged. Alan met it head-on, ducking under a swipe of its claws and delivering a quick slash to its side. The creature barely flinched, turning with alarming speed and swiping its tail at him. The serpent's fangs gleamed, dripping with venom as it struck. Alan rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the attack. "I could use some of that magic now," he shouted. Lyara didn't hesitate. She raised her hands and the glow from her amulet intensified. A beam of light shot forward, striking the chimera in its chest. The creature roared in pain, momentarily stunned. Alan seized the opportunity, lunging forward and landing a solid blow to its shoulder. But the chimera wasn't done. It recovered, quickly, its wings beating furiously as it lifted off the ground. The gust of wind knocked Alan back, and he landed hard against the stone floor. The creature swooped down, its claws aimed directly at him. Liara's voice rang out, clear and commanding. "Hold on!" She activated her amulet again, this time creating a shimmering barrier around Alan. The chimera's claws struck the barrier, the force of the impact sending ripples through the glowing shield, but leaving Alan unharmed. "Nice timing," Alan said, getting back to his feet. The chimera landed heavily, shaking the ground beneath them. Lyara stepped forward, her amulet glowing brighter than ever. "Keep it distracted," Alan smirked. "Distraction's my specialty." He charged at the creature, feinting to one side before delivering a quick strike to its hind leg. The chimera roared, turning its attention fully to him. Lyara used the opening to summon another beam of light, this one aimed at the creature's head. The chimera staggered, its movements slowing as the light seemed to sap its strength. Alan saw his chance. With a determined shout, he lunged forward, driving his blade into the chimera's chest. The creature let out one final, deafening roar, before collapsing to the ground, its body dissolving into a faint mist. Breathing heavily, Alan turned to Lyara, who was leaning against the wall for support. "You okay?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. She nodded, though her glow had dimmed slightly. "I'll be fine." That took more energy than I expected. Alan stepped closer, offering her a hand. "You did great. Couldn't have done it without you." Lyara took his hand, her cheeks flushing faintly. "You weren't so bad yourself." They stood there for a moment, their hands lingering before Alan cleared his throat and stepped back. "So, this great crown, it's got to be close, right?" Lyara smiled softly. "If the Guardian was here, then yes, it's near. But there will be more challenges ahead." Alan grinned. Wouldn't have it any other way. Together they moved toward the next corridor, the bond between them growing stronger with every step. The great crown awaited, and with it, the promise of power, and perhaps something even greater. The corridor grew narrower, the oppressive weight of the dungeon's atmosphere intensifying with every step Alan and Lyara took. The air felt charged, humming faintly with energy that made their skin prickle. They exchanged a glance as they reached the end of the passageway. Before them loomed an immense, ornately carved door, its surface inlaid with runes that pulsed, faintly with a golden light. The door itself seemed to breathe, the runes flickering like a heartbeat. "I'm guessing the big bad is in there," Alan muttered, gripping the hilt of his sword. His voice, while calm, betrayed a flicker of unease. Lyara nodded, her luminous eyes scanning the runes. "These markings, they're ancient, a warning. Whatever's behind that door is powerful, dangerous." "Great," Alan said with a wry smile, "because everything else so far has been a picnic." Liara's lips twitched into a faint smile despite the tension. "We need to be careful. The Guardian we fought earlier was nothing compared to what's ahead." Alan took a deep breath and pushed against the door. It groaned loudly as it swung open, revealing a vast chamber bathed in an eerie crimson glow. At its center lay a massive pile of gold, jewels, and artifacts. Perched atop the treasure, coiled in all its terrifying glory, was a dragon. Its scales shimmered like molten metal, and its eyes burned with a fierce, unrelenting fire. The beast let out a low growl, the sound vibrating through the chamber. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me," Alan muttered. "A dragon? Why not throw in a giant lava pit while we're at it?" Lyara stepped closer to him, her amulet glowing faintly. "That's no ordinary dragon. It's an elder worm. They're nearly impossible to kill." The dragon's gaze locked onto them, and it let out a deafening roar that shook the very foundations of the dungeon. Flames flickered at the edges of its massive jaws as it unfurled its wings, casting a shadow that seemed to envelop the entire chamber. "Impossible or not, we've got to try," Alan said, stepping forward and drawing his blade. "Stay back. Keep that magic ready. I'll distract it." Lyara hesitated, her eyes flicking between Alan and the dragon. "You can't fight that thing alone." "Not planning to," he said with a smirk. "But I'll need you to time your spells right. Hit it where it hurts." The dragon didn't wait for them to strategize further. It lunged, its massive claws raking across the ground as it closed the distance between them. Alan darted to the side, narrowly avoiding a swipe that could have torn him in two. He rolled to his feet and slashed at the dragon's flank. The blade connected, but the scales deflected the blow, leaving only a faint scratch. "Well, that's not going to work," Alan muttered, dodging another attack. Liara's amulet flared to life as she raised her hands. A beam of shimmering light shot toward the dragon's head, striking one of its glowing eyes. The beast roared in fury, rearing back as the light temporarily blinded it. "Nice shot," Alan called out, using the opening to leap onto the dragon's back. He drove his blade between its scales, but the weapon barely pierced its thick hide. The dragon bucked violently, throwing him off with a crash. Lyara rushed to his side, her hands glowing as she placed them over his injuries. The warmth of her magic flowed through him, easing the pain and sealing the wounds. "We need a new plan," she said urgently. Alan groaned, sitting up. "Got any ideas? Because I'm fresh." "Out." Lyara's gaze shifted to the amulet around her neck. "The amulet? It can channel immense power, but it's risky. I've never used it to its full potential before." Alan met her eyes, his expression serious. "If it's our best shot, we take it. What do you need me to do?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Keep it distracted. I'll need time to gather enough energy." Alan stood, gripping his sword. "Consider it done." He charged at the dragon, shouting to draw its attention. The beast turned its wrath on him, flames erupting from its jaws as it unleashed a torrent of fire. Alan dove behind a pile of rubble, narrowly avoiding being incinerated. Meanwhile, Lyara closed her eyes, her amulet glowing brighter with each passing second. The light spread, surrounding her in a radiant aura that pulsed with power. The ground beneath her trembled as the energy built, the air around her crackling. The dragon lunged at Alan, its claws ripping through the rubble as it pursued him relentlessly. Alan fought back, striking at its limbs and dodging its powerful tail. His movements were precise, each step calculated to keep the dragon's focus on him. "Lyara, whatever you're doing, do it fast," he shouted, barely avoiding another fiery blast. The light from Lyara's amulet reached its peak, enveloping the chamber in a blinding brilliance. She opened her eyes, now glowing with the same radiant energy, and raised her hands. "Alan, get clear!" He didn't hesitate. He dove behind another pile of debris as Lyara unleashed a massive wave of energy. The beam struck the dragon square in the chest, piercing its scales and sending it crashing to the ground. The beast roared in agony, its body convulsing as the energy overwhelmed it. With a final deafening cry, the dragon collapsed, its massive form dissolving into shimmering particles that floated upward before fading into nothingness. The chamber fell silent, the oppressive energy lifting as the dragon's presence vanished. Alan approached Lyara, who was kneeling on the ground, visibly drained. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did it," he said softly. She looked up at him, a tired but triumphant smile on her face. "We did it." He helped her to her feet, and together they turned their attention to the treasure hoard. At the center of the pile, resting atop a pedestal, was the great crown. Its surface shimmered with an otherworldly light, a symbol of both immense power and the challenges they had overcome. "Well," Alan said, grinning, "let's go claim your crown, princess." The chamber fell silent after the dragon's defeat, its once mighty form reduced to shimmering particles that floated away like fading starlight. Alan and Lyara stood amidst the aftermath, their breaths heavy and their hearts racing. The oppressive energy that had filled the dungeon seemed to dissipate, leaving behind an almost serene stillness. Yet the weight of the moment lingered, as if the very air knew they were standing on the edge of something extraordinary. Alan extended a hand to Lyara, helping her rise from where she had knelt, drained but victorious. The radiant light from her amulet had dimmed, but its soft glow remained, a testament to the incredible power she had wielded. Despite the exhaustion etched on her face, her luminous eyes carried a quiet determination that Alan couldn't help but admire. "Not bad for a princess," Alan said, a tired but genuine smile spreading across his face. "Though I'm starting to think you're more warrior than royalty." Lyara chuckled softly, brushing a strand of silvery hair from her face. Her laugh, light and melodic, seemed to chase away the lingering tension. "And you're not as reckless as you look," she teased. "Well, maybe just a little." Alan grinned, adjusting his blade on his back. "I'll take that as a compliment. Now, how about we finish what we came here for?" Their attention turned to the centerpiece of the treasure hoard, the great crown. Resting atop a pedestal carved from ancient stone, the crown seemed to radiate its own light, casting a golden glow over the room. Its intricate design was otherworldly, with runes etched into its surface that seemed to shift and dance as if alive, carrying whispers of forgotten power. Lyara approached it slowly, her steps deliberate and reverent. Alan followed, his hand instinctively resting on the hilt of his blade out of habit, though he doubted anything else in the dungeon could top the dragon they'd just faced. As Lyara reached out, her fingers hovering just above the crown, she paused and turned to Alan. "This crown, it's more than a symbol," she said, her voice filled with awe and reverence. "It's a bond, a connection to the throne and the people it protects. It chooses its wielder, not the other way around." Alan raised an eyebrow, folding his arms. "So what happens if it doesn't choose you?" Liara's lips curved into a faint smile, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. "Then this entire journey was for nothing. But I have to try." With a deep breath, she lifted the crown. The runes flared to life, glowing brighter as if recognizing her touch. Lyara closed her eyes, and for a moment the room seemed to hold its breath. The energy that surged through the chamber was palpable, swirling around her like a celestial storm. Alan shielded his eyes, squinting against the blinding light. When the brilliance subsided, he lowered his arm and stared in awe. Lyara stood transformed. Her presence was radiant, commanding, and every bit as regal as the crown demanded. The great crown seemed to merge with her, amplifying her already striking features and enveloping her in an aura of authority. She looked like a queen born anew, destined for greatness. "Well," Alan said, his voice breaking the silence, "I guess it's safe to say it chose you." Lyara turned to him, her glowing eyes softening. Her voice was steady, carrying the weight of her transformation. "I couldn't have done this without you, Alan. You've proven yourself more than just an ally. You've proven yourself worthy." Alan chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. His usual confidence wavered under the intensity of her gaze. "Worthy of what? Getting burned by a dragon? Or maybe running headfirst into danger?" Lyara stepped closer, her expression serious yet warm. "Worthy of standing by my side as king." Alan blinked, caught completely off guard. "King? Me? I'm not exactly throne material, princess." "You are to me," she said softly, her voice carrying a conviction that left no room for doubt. "You've shown courage, loyalty, and a strength of character that surpasses any title or bloodline. My people need someone like you. And so do I." For once, Alan was at a loss for words. He stared into her glowing eyes, seeing not just a princess or a warrior, but someone who had come to mean far more to him than he'd realized. Slowly, a smile spread across his face. "Well, if you put it that way," he said, stepping closer, "I'd be an idiot to say no." Liara's smile widened, and before either of them could second-guess the moment, Alan leaned in. Their lips met in a kiss that was both tender and electrifying, sealing not just their partnership, but the bond they had forged through fire and trials. When they finally broke apart, Liara's cheeks flushed faintly, and Alan's smirk returned. "Guess that makes it official, huh?" "Officially complicated," Lyara teased, though her eyes sparkled with warmth. "But we'll figure it out, together." Hand in hand they left the chamber, the great crown secure, and their path forward uncertain, but full of promise. Alan's adventurous spirit and Lyara's royal destiny had collided in the most unexpected way, creating a story that neither of them would soon forget. As they stepped into the light of a new dawn, the stars above seemed to align, marking the beginning of a legend that would echo across the galaxy.